Hare Krishna. So it's my fortune I get a chance to speak to you all again. So try to focus in on what I'm going to say today, because it's an important point that I'm going to try to make today. And I'll see if I can make it very clearly and very concisely so as not to blur too many things together. This is particularly important because many of you come from either a background in India or possibly a background in the Caribbean, where there is also a predominance of Vedic culture, or the culture of the Vedas. So today I'm going to try to make a very simple point, and I'm going to underline with why I'm making this point today. So my acronym is HURAT, H-U-R-A-T. Here, that's H. U is understand what I'm trying to say. H-U, who. R is for remember. And A is for apply it in your everyday life. And T is the last one, that for extra credit, tell somebody else. So you best remember things when you explain them to somebody else. Then you can realize how much you've actually understood it. So we may understand or wonder what is the actual real purpose of the Vedas. And we don't just choose out something. Many times people imagine that the Vedas have many different things to tell, and whatever thing we take away from the Vedas, that's good. So some people follow one process, other people follow a different process, and therefore whatever process you are open to or you resonate more with, we can just follow that process. And indeed, the Vedas do say many things. So in Mahabharata, Yudhishthira says, Tarko pratishta shruyato vibinam nasa vrishir yasya matam nabinam dharmasya tattva nihitam guhayam mahajano yenagata sapanta. That Tarko pratishta, that if you just tried various arguments, you won't understand the truth. Shruyato vibina, the Vedas themselves have many stories to tell. They have many possible applications and paths. Nasa vrishir yasya matam nabinam, that a great speaker or a great philosopher is not distinguished unless he contradicts other philosophies. But the solid truth of Vedic knowledge is hidden in the heart of a pure devotee. Therefore, as the Vedas suggest, we should follow whatever process the pure devotees chalk out. So that's the ultimate conclusion. Whatever process the pure devotees chalk out. So I'm going to try to do this. Let's see if I can keep myself on a very simple course here. So the real purpose of the Vedas, we don't just choose something at random. So this is why most people get it wrong. We have to really know what the Vedas teach and why, and what's more important and what's less important and why. So try to tune in now. I have the same, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. When somebody else is speaking, my mind also races off to some other faraway, distant place, So try to hear, try to remember, try to understand, So what is Krishna really telling Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita? Out of all the Vedic literatures, probably the most widely read and the most widely accepted is Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna doesn't make any secret about it. He mentions many things to Arjuna. So first 6 chapters, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. Arjuna has decided not to fight. And Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. And he mentions, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. He mentions Jnana Yoga meditation. He mentions Buddhi Yogam. He mentions so many different things. So many people say that because Krishna mentions all these different things, you can choose whichever path you like. But that's not what Krishna says. So after explaining these different paths, these different types of Vedic knowledge, Krishna comes to a conclusion, and he tells Arjuna something. And this is what he tells Arjuna. Tapas vibhyo diko yogi jnanibhyo pimato dikaha karmibhyo chadiko yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. So after explaining these various paths, he says, the yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Tapas vibhyo, tapas means to perform austerities. Adiko means yogi is better than the tapas vibhyo. The jnanibhyo, that's people who follow jnana path, that also the yogi is better than the jnanis. Finally, he says, karmibhyas, that those who are also following the path of karma, the yogi is better. Therefore, tasmad, yogi bhavarjuna, my dear Arjuna, be a yogi. So what does he mean by yogi? He explains it in the next verse. Yoginam api sarvesham madgantenantaratmanam shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktattamo mataha. And of all yogis, is that readable from where you are? I'm just wondering if the point size is big enough. You can read that, or is it too small?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So, which kind of yogi? There are many different kinds of yogis. There are yogis who meditate on the impersonal. There are yogis who simply meditate on nothing. There are yogis who do all kinds of different activities. But the kind of yogi Krishna is referring to here is always thinking of me with great faith and rendering service. Now, what kind of yogi is this? This is a bhakti yogi. A yogi that is in the process we call bhakti. Bhakti is the yoga of devotion. What do we mean by devotion? We mean devotion not to anyone. You can be devoted to so many things. People are devoted to all kinds of crazy things. But a yogi who is devoted to Krishna, particularly Krishna. So that is a bhakti yogi. And what does he expect to get back? Nothing. He's serving Krishna because that is the perfection of bhakti yoga. We are not expecting any return. That is bhakti yoga. We're not worshiping Shiva. We're not worshiping Ganesh. We're not worshiping Parvati or Durga Devi. We're worshiping just Krishna. Just Krishna. Because we know everything comes from Krishna. Everything goes back to Krishna. We do not have to worship the demigods separately. Devarshi bhutaptan rinam patrinam na kinkaro nayamrini charajan sarvatmanoya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parahitya kartam. So all the demigods and all the other things that we should respect, the forefathers, the sages, our family members, people in general, animals, all these kinds of things. We owe duties and obligations. But if one worships Mukunda, the giver of liberation, one automatically satisfies all these other requirements. We do not have to worship them separately. So just by worshiping Krishna, we are serving everyone, all the demigods, all the forefathers, all of our parents and friends and relatives, everything, all at the same time, all in one package. So if you water the root of a tree, you're watering the entire tree. You do not have to water each leaf individually. So that's what I'm pointing out here, that Krishna does explain many paths in Bhagavad Gita in the first 6 chapters, but the end of the 6 chapters, you see this is Bhagavad Gita 6:47, that's the last verse of the 6th chapter. At the end of the 6th chapter, he says, be a yogi. And what kind of yogi? A bhakti yogi. So he's not telling Arjuna to be a karmi or a tapasvi or anything else. Generally in the Vedas, there are 3 paths. One is called the path of karma, one is called the path of jnana, and one is called the path of yoga. So the path of karma means that we perform various Vedic rituals so that our wealth will be increased, our enemies and difficulties will be decreased, that we will gain prosperity and notoriety, and whatever resources we need will be supplied. This is why people perform karma. Jnana means we are studying the Vedic scriptures to find out what is this mysterious thing the Vedas are really talking about. And people spend their whole lives studying all kinds of Vedas. And we're going to see in a minute, the Vedas are vast. And yoga is the process of focusing on the internal aspect of the self. But most people don't know what the self really is, or how to perform yoga properly. In fact, most of us are disqualified from performing yoga as a spiritual process. Now, there's no doubt people can perform yoga for physical benefit. That's a different thing. But as a spiritual practice, we are disqualified from reaching the goal of yoga. So Krishna is leaving aside these 3 paths, karma, jnana, and yoga. Now here we mean not the bhakti yoga or bhakti yogi. We're talking about the regular path of yoga where one tries to focus the mind in such a way that one will stop all sensory input. Now that Ashtanga yoga is very difficult to do. That's the kind of yoga that we do not recommend as a process of spiritual attainment. So, here are the Vedas. And if you all came from an Indian background, or even if you didn't, but you've run into the Vedas at different times, you will undoubtedly be bewildered by this fact that the Vedas, the Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajur Vedas are huge. The Rig Veda is something like 1,024 verses. And what are they? They discuss glories of various demigods. For the most part, that's what they are. Sama Veda is the Veda of various songs. It's pulled from the Rig Veda, but these are songs for particular demigod, arranged in such a way that when a person performs a artik or a puja to a particular demigod, one can have all the prayer offerings to that demigod all in one place. So for people who are performing these kind of sacrifices, that's the Sama Veda. The Yajur Veda describes how to perform these sacrifices properly. And the Atharva Veda describes various other incantations for auspiciousness in daily life. Now, these are huge. We notice Prabhupada never translated the Rig Veda. He never translated the Sama Veda. He never translated the Yajur or Atharva Veda. Why not? Because there's nothing about bhakti in these Vedas. And this is the biggest chunk of the Vedas. And that's why people who come from an Indian background think, well, I must perform these various yogas. I must perform these various havans. I have to perform this sacrifice, that sacrifice. And if you go to any other temple other than an ISKCON temple in, New York, unless it's a Vaishnava temple, you will see people doing these things, performing various fire sacrifices to various demigods. And as we say, you go to one of these other institutions, one of these other temples, Hindu temples in New York, you will see all the gods there. All of them will be there. Shiva, Durga Devi, those are the big ones. And we'll see many other incarnations and whatnot there. And that's because people think that the way to process the Vedas is to perform these yajnas. And if we read the main part of the Vedas, the Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajurveda, that's exactly what they say. So that's why people have that idea. It comes from the Vedas. So the Vedas were divided into four by Vyasadeva. Now, Vyasadeva is the key figure here. So the four Vedas together are called the Samhitas, as we see in the middle here. From the Samhitas, Vedavyas gave this knowledge to his students, which became professors, as Prabhupada calls them, of these various Vedas. And they came up with what we call the Brahmanas. They expanded these various four Vedas to perform various sacrifices for people living in urban areas in India. So that was the Brahmanas. Now, there were people who decided to either not accept household life, or they were older, so they dropped out of household life and moved to the forest. And for them, the Aranyakas, which means forest dwellers, those people who live in the forest have a little more information about why are we doing all these yajnas? Who are these demigods? What is the real substance behind all this? It's a mystery. So finally, we come to the Upanishads. And the Upanishads, in a kind of not so clear way, explain what the Vedas are really up to. Who's behind the demigods? How did this whole system get created? What is the real goal? Are we just trying to be happy in this material world? Are we trying to go to the heavenly planets? Are we trying to become well known on this earth planet? What is the real thing? So again, if you look here, on the left side, 90% or more of the Vedas is about karma and jnana, which we are absolutely not interested in. So that's why people coming from India have the wrong conception. And if you go to any other temple other than an ISKCON temple or a Vaishnava temple, you will not hear anything about this at all. You will hear about these sacrifices and worships, and you'll see various pujas and havans done. And this is all done because mostly the Vedas recommend this. But why do we, as ISKCON, not recommend these things? Why do we have a different view? We're going to come to that. So we are focused on Bhagavad Gita, as we see in number 3 here, which is about bhakti. We're focused on Srimad Bhagavatam, which is about bhakti. And we're focused on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is about bhakti. Now, is this just a ISKCON exceptionalism, or is this some kind of Vaishnava thing which looks down their nose on other paths? There certainly are other paths, and we do not accept them, and Vaishnava tradition categorically places all these other paths in a secondary category. So it's not the best way to reach the highest goal, because these other paths do not even know what the highest goal is. So now we're going to get to the main part of my presentation here. That why do we say this? Is this just, Hare Krishnas that come from Prabhupada's line, all saying something different than all other Hindu temples teach? And the answer is yes. But why? Why? Because in 4th and 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. So in the first canto, in 4th and 5th chapter, we have the explanation why. So who wrote the Vedas? Well, Vedas wrote the Vedas. But he didn't come up with them. He simply was the mouthpiece for their transcription. Vedas saw that Kali Yuga is coming. We're in Kali Yuga here. Vedas saw that Kali Yuga is coming. And he could understand that people would be lazy, misguided, that their intelligence and memory would be very poor, so they would not be able to remember. So he knew that unless in Kali Yuga the Vedas were put in written form, people would not be able to remember them. Previously, the Vedas were spoken. It was an oral tradition. In other words, the guru would speak to the disciple, and the disciple could remember everything. And the Vedas were written in a verse form because it's easier to remember poetry, it's easier to remember songs than it is to remember just a bunch of non-verse text, or prose as we call it. So the Vedas are written in a poetic form, so to make it easy to remember. And Vedas understood that this was necessary because in Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, people's memories were very sharp. Prabhupada tells the story that there was this one Indian yogi, and he was sitting under a tree, and two gentlemen from Europe somewhere came, and they had an argument. And one of the gentlemen shot the other. And later on, this came to court. And they were speaking some European language, French or German or something like that. And so they called the yogi because he saw the whole thing happen. And the yogi did not speak German or French, whatever the language they were speaking was, but he remembered word for word what they said, even though it was in a foreign language, and they used this as evidence, So, it would be hard for the yogi to make up something if he doesn't even understand the language that he's speaking in. So this shows that, and this is also, although we are, nothing in the same category, I'm amazed that sometimes I can remember some of these verses, they're in a language I don't speak. And I'm surprised there's verses I know the Sanskrit of, but I don't know the English. So sometimes, because it's poetic and because it actually is the resonance of the true spiritual knowledge, the mind can focus on it sometimes. Of course, there are many verses I can't remember. Some verses I really try to remember and I can't. But there are others that I can remember. So Vyasadeva wrote this down because he knew Kali Yuga was coming. He knew that people would not remember. Now, he did more than that. He wrote the Vedas down, and then after writing them down, he thought most people aren't interested in philosophy. So if I just say all this philosophy, most people don't have time for philosophy. They don't have the kind of mathematical sort of systematic mind to remember and understand philosophy. So he thought, how will I get this across? So he wrote the itihasas, particularly Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is the story, because he knows people are interested in stories, even if they're not interested in philosophy, even if they're not interested in any kind of, morality or any kind of scripture. They like stories. And so the Mahabharata has been performed, it's been made into a movie, it's been made into a drama, a play. There was one man, I forgot the name of him, that he did 6 or 8 hour version of the Mahabharata because it's a huge story. 200,000 verses is the Mahabharata. So it's huge, and he put the whole thing into a drama, and you had to come to the drama for 3 days in a row for the whole thing to go, because people can't sit in a theater for 6 hours straight, So he did it like that. So the stories, though, captivate the mind. And in those stories, we have heroes and heroines, and we have people who are the antagonists, people who do things wrong, and we learn how people should interact, what's noble and what's actually unknoble or ignoble. We learn what is right, what is wrong through these stories. So he wrote the Mahabharata. Then Vyasadeva wrote what we call the Vedanta Sutra. He knew that he wanted to sum up all Vedic knowledge in one place. So that is the Vedanta Sutra. However, the Vedanta Sutra is written as a sutra. The sutra means that it is very, very concise. In fact, the verses of the Vedanta Sutra are like just mnemonics. They're just little pieces. If you were going to study for a very difficult mathematics exam in a college course, you might write down little snippets of 3 or 4 verses, or 3 or 4 words, to remind yourself of some principle. You're not going to write down the whole thing because you're not going to be able to remember that. But if you write down something very short, so that's the Vedanta Sutra. So the Vedanta Sutra was the end. You have the Vedas, the Puranas, all these other things had been already written, and then the Vedanta Sutra, and then the Mahabharata. So all these things were written down, and in the 4th chapter of 1st canto, Vedavyas says, I wrote all these things down, but I'm not satisfied. I feel something missing in my heart. What is missing? And Vedavyas himself says at the end of the 4th chapter of the 1st canto, he says, maybe because I did not give prominence to Bhakti Yoga. I did not give prominence to Bhakti Yoga. That's why I feel this way. But his spiritual master, Narada Muni, was coming. So he knew to ask his spiritual master. We see in this picture on the right is Narada Muni, or maybe it's on the left, depending on, I guess it is reversed, but Narada Muni is in the sort of side there. He's in orange, and he's got the Veena over his shoulder, and that's Vyasadeva on the other side in the white. So Narada Muni is Vyasadev's guru. And Narada Muni understands that his disciple, Narada Muni, has a problem. So he's coming to instruct his disciple, Vyasadeva. And Narada Muni, in a very coy, kind of humorous way, says, my dear Vyas, you have certainly studied the Vedas, and in fact, you have transcribed the Vedas. And you are equipped with all Vedic knowledge, and you live a very pious life. You're doing everything correctly. Are you happy? So Vedavyas tells his spiritual master, Narada Muni, my dear spiritual master, I am not at all satisfied. But I am asking you, because you know everything and you're my guru, please tell me what I have done wrong. What is it that I have not accomplished? So, to make the story short, he says, what you have not done is you have not explained the glories of the Supreme Lord. And as Vedavyas himself could understand. You have not given prominence to Bhakti Yoga. So what did Vyasadeva do? He wrote one more Vedic literature. What is that Vedic literature? He wrote Srimad Bhagavatam. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no emphasis on the path of jnana. There is no emphasis on the path of yoga. There is no emphasis on the path of karma. Why? Because all these things are impractical and they do not lead to the ultimate service of the Supreme Lord. So all these things, they're mentioned, but they are not given prominence. In the rest of the Vedas, they're given prominence. In fact, they're given more prominence than Bhakti. And that's why people imagine that all these various other paths have some importance, but actually no. The real substance, the real center of all Vedic knowledge is Bhakti Yoga. Krishna says it himself, as we just said, tapas vibhyo diko yogi, jnanibhyo pimato dikaha, karmibhyas chadiko yogi, tasmad yogi bhavarjana. Don't be a tapasvi, a renunciate that gives various kinds of penances. Do not become a jnani. Do not become a karmi. Become a yogi. And then in the next verse, we find what kind of yogi. And that kind of yogi is a bhakti yogi. So this is the real center. And this is why there's no doubt that people follow these other practices. There's no doubt the Vedas teach them. But the Vedas actually, the center focus of the Vedas, the center focus is Bhakti Yoga. What is Bhakti Yoga? Service to the Supreme Lord. And that is done in 9 processes. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smarnam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmini Videnam. Iti Pumsarpika Vishnu. So this is the 9 processes that we recommend. Shravanam, hearing, Kirtanam, chanting, Vishnu, Smarnam, remembering, Padasevanam, serving, Archanam, worshiping like we do either on the altar or if someone's performing puja, even our chanting while the deities are open. This is worshiping. Vandanam is offering prayers. Dasyam is becoming a servant. Sakyam is becoming a friend. And Atmini Vedam is surrendering everything. So these are Bhakti Yoga. You notice that there is no offering of havans there. There's no performance of egregious tapas or penances. There's no mention about difficult yoga process of focusing the mind inward. These things are not mentioned there. This is Bhakti Yoga. And it starts with hearing. Starts with hearing, particularly the Bhakti main mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is our method. And of all the processes, this will give us the most bang for our buck, as they say, is this chanting of Hare Krishna. And this is the process of bhakti as contrasted with the process of jnana, the process of yoga, the processes of karma. And although the Vedas teach these processes are for people who cannot or will not accept bhakti. And they are lesser processes. If one engages in bhakti, there is no worry about not performing the other processes. This is the best. This is the center process. So I want to stop here and see if any of you have any questions. So this is the main takeaway here, is that we are putting forward a process, and that process is bhakti. We know there are other processes in the Vedas, and we know that the other processes in the Vedas are more, by volume, more represented. Why were they represented? They were represented by Vedas, who wrote the Vedas. But Vedas himself was dissatisfied with the fact that he gave too much emphasis to other processes. So Vedas, he arranged to overcome that difficulty, to rectify that mistake by writing Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why we're interested in Bhagavatam. And that's why we're trying to get across this idea. You may see, sometimes we do yagyas, but our real process is chanting and hearing. Our real process is seva. Our real process is worship in the Pancharatra tradition. Okay, so questions or comments? Anybody has any question or comment? Yeah, can I get someone to run the microphone since...
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. 2 questions.
Yeah.
One, is that true that bhakti is a lot easy in Kali Yuga than Satyuga and Dwapar and Treta?
Well, bhakti is easier in any yuga, but bhakti, or particularly the processes of chanting, is specifically recommended in Kali Yuga. So we have Kritaya Dhyayato Vishnum, Tretayam Yajato Makai, Dwapare Paricharyayam Kalaryadhare Kirtanat, which is in, I believe, the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that Kritaya Dhyayatom Vishnum, Krita Yuga, which is another name for Satya Yuga, Dhyayatom Vishnu, the process of meditation was recommended. Tretayam Yajatomakai. In the Treta Yuga, the process of doing various fire sacrifices was recommended. In Dwapare Paricharyayam, in Dwapara Yuga, the process of doing deity worship was recommended. But in Kali Yuga, Kalaryadhare Kirtana, that in Kali Yuga, all those processes are too difficult to perform. I mean, we do them. Sometimes we do havan, sometimes we definitely do deity worship. But those aren't the main process. And the main process is Hare Kirtana, or chanting the holy name. So in the, that's the Nava Yogendra speaking to Maharaj Nimi, that he gets the audience of the Nava Yogendras, and he asks them several questions. And so he answered, one of them, I forget which one of the Nava Yogendras, answers with that statement that the Kali Yuga is very difficult. So the best way in Kali Yuga is to chant Krishna's name. And besides that, we have these 9 processes of devotional service that encircle the chanting and help the chanting to be effective. So in Chaitanya Leela, we have Lord Chaitanya bringing to the foreground this verse from the, I think, Naradiya's Purana, or whatever it is, the Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam, Kaloa Nasteva, 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 Gachir Anyata. That in the age of Kali Yuga, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. Chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. So it's rare in a verse you'll see the same words repeated over and over again. So it's for emphasis that in the age of Kali Yuga, you know, other things don't work. They might have worked in Satya Yuga, they might have worked in Treta Yuga, or even Dwapara Yuga. But in Kali Yuga, forget it. It's not going to work. What was your other question?
Second question. In the process of bhakti, the distraction, negative thoughts, what is this? Is this Maya, or is it Krishna testing?
It's Maya, you know. The problem is we may understand what bhakti is, at least in a theoretical framework. We understand what it is or what it comprises. However, our hearts are not situated in bhakti. We have bad habits and material desires that have been with us for many lifetimes. So therefore, they skew our attempts to focus on bhakti. So not to worry, that's common. And one has to continue to perform bhakti. And as the heart is cleansed, then gradually the ability to focus on Krishna more completely becomes more represented. We had this question just a couple of days ago. And so Rupa Goswami mentions that there are 9 stages of devotional service. That there is, what is it? It starts with Shraddha, faith. Then there is association with devotees. Then there is the process of bhajana kriya, or accepting a guru and following rules and regulations. That's stage 3. Stage 4 is anartha nivriti, which is the unwanted things in the heart gradually being purified. Above anartha nivriti is nishtha, which is the process of steadiness or very deep focus. And then above that is ruchi. So at the stage of ruchi, or taste, that means our consciousness has been purified enough that we are genuinely attracted to spiritual principles and activities, and we are genuinely not interested in material activities. Right now, we're in the stage where we do what we know we should do because we know it's good for us, but we don't genuinely find ourselves attracted. We're obviously attracted to some forms of devotional service, or we wouldn't be here. But we don't find all aspects of devotional service attractive. So we kind of keep our distance. But as the process advances, as we go through the various stages, we go from, first of all, ado shraddha tata sadhu sangha ta bhajana kriyaha tatos. The verse is slipping my mind right now, but the verse starts off with shraddha is faith. Person has faith that there is some kind of spiritual knowledge out there somewhere. Then there's sadhu sangha, associating with devotees, trying to cultivate that faith and trying it on for size. Then there's the third stage, which is bhajana kriya, where one is enough convinced that they think, I'll take initiation, I'll try to follow the process of devotional service. I'll give up meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling, and I'll chant Hare Krishna regularly every day. Then that real purification begins, and one starts to get rid of anartha nivriti, of various unwanted things. And then when anartha nivriti, or unwanted things, are there, we come to nishtha, steadiness in our service. Then there's, after steadiness, ruchi, or taste. And usually at the stage of ruchi, at that point, we're pretty stable. We understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we begin to already have a taste for performing devotional service. And even if temptations and alternate possibilities are there, we're not so much attracted. So at that point, we find ourselves able. And after ruchi, there is atta shakti, where we become a little bit more aware of what spiritual activity we are performing in the spiritual world, because we come from there and we're going to go back there. So we become aware of that. Then above that is bhava, which is we start to have a genuine affection for the Supreme Lord in an actual relationship. And above that is finally prema. So these are the higher stages. And, as I try to say often, that when we first come in contact with Krishna consciousness, often we hear the principles, they sound good, they sound real, we engage in them, but the very first realization we hit is how much we are junkies to this material world. We still want material things. We know better, we understand better, but we have to fight against the tendencies of our previous lifetimes. And those samskaras don't end quickly, but they will end, and they gradually become more and more diminished as we climb the ladder of these 9 steps of devotional service. Okay. Any other quick questions here? Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for your excellent clarification. It's not a question, just I want to make sure my understanding. When you were just discussing about the Sri Krishna and Arjuna discussion, Krishna was inspiring Arjuna to go for fighting in against of his relatives, right? And if I understand rightly, Arjuna was not willing to do this.
Right.
But everything was designed before. So
But
if
everything was
designed before,
Yeah.
Krishna inspired him, yes, you just do your karma, right? Everything was designed before. If it is so, if I do any wrong thing, so who will be responsible for that? Am I responsible for this wrongdoing? As because it is designed previously according to Sri Krishna's Bani. So who will be actually guilty feelings? If I do anything, I always think that yes, I am guilty man. I did this. Why I did this? But according to the discussion of the Arjuna,
Keep the microphone.
according to the discussion of the Arjuna and Sri Krishna, Arjuna just was selected because of a yogi, because of a real person of Sri Krishna, and Sri Krishna chose him because he is the only people who can do this. So my question is simply, any wrongdoing, who will take the responsibility? Thank you.
Well, Krishna is the basis of all morality. Whatever Krishna wants is by definition morality. It's by definition the highest thing. So we follow, and Arjuna follows, the idea of Bhakti Yoga, which is not to be inert. You know, we're doing something. Arjuna had to do something. He had to follow the suggestion that Krishna wanted the Kurukshetra war. Arjuna didn't want it. Krishna wanted it. So Arjuna was hesitating to follow Krishna's direction. But after hearing Bhagavad Gita, he changed his mind and followed Krishna's direction. So generally, of course, in a war, there's going to be all kinds of death and horrible things happening. But since Arjuna is fighting on behalf of Krishna, and Arjuna is actually following morality, somebody like a policeman or a warrior, they have to perform violence. It's their very nature of their duty. So what they do is they perform violence on people who are actually aggressors to stop them from harming people who are innocent. So they perform violence on one category of people to stop violence on another category of people. The people who are innocent, those people need to be protected. Similarly, those people who are aggressive usually cannot listen to reason and therefore have to be stopped with violence. So Arjuna was both acting in his duty as a kshatriya, eliminating violence by being violent against aggressors, and at the same time he was following Krishna's instructions. So therefore Arjuna was not liable for any karma or any bad result from the process of the Kurukshetra war. Later, at the end of the Kurukshetra war, Yudhisthira has the same problem, but it was Bhishmadev that finally convinces Yudhisthira that he didn't perform any sin in this battle of Kurukshetra. All right, so we're going to stop here. But I appreciate your earnest...
Maharaj, I have one question on the same thing.
Okay, we'll do one more question.
So Maharaj, like in Mahabharata, Krishna says Arjuna, like on the same context of Mataji, that this is your Kshatriya dharma and you should be doing that. But in this world, what's our dharma? We are not Kshatriya.
Right, right.
So what's our dharma and what should we do? Like,
Well, that's what the whole varnashram system is. You know, you have 4 varnas. the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So these varnas are only roughly approximate to our situation, because in Kali Yuga, basically everybody's a Shudra. Kala Sudra Sambhava. That's what the Vedas say, that, in Sat Yuga you had genuine Brahmanas, genuine Kshatriyas, genuine Vaishyas, but in Kali Yuga mostly everybody's some flavor of Shudra, But nevertheless, some people will perform activities like teaching. Some people will perform activities like being administrators or policemen or warriors, soldiers. Some people will perform activities like being Vaishyas. And some people will just serve somebody in some occupational salary, So that's all these things. So these are our external. We have to do something to stay alive. But we should never give up the understanding that what we're really trying to do is to purify our heart through the process of Bhakti Yoga, Shravanam, Kirtan, Vishnu Smaranam, through doing these activities. So we have to do some kind of work. We shouldn't do some kind of sinful work, like work, in meat processing plants or something like that, or make cigarettes or these kind of things, or work in those type of industries. But in general, we have to perform some work to stay alive, or we have to engage in some kind of enterprise to make money to stay alive. And by doing that, we should give some percentage of that to the process of devotional service, which is kind of a whole explanation in and of itself. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay. But I thank you for your nice question. So we'll end here. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam.